Well, hello,
Hey
everyone.
there. Hey.
Hey, it is time yet again for another updated twist on the Wednesday night Bible study that you may have grown up. I know I sure did with my fundamentalist upbringing. Tonight, Reverend Dr. David Breeden will offer readings from the Hebrew and the Christian scriptures that make up the Bible. We'll cover some of the Christian basics and explore Bible's themes, contradictions, and curiosities. Tonight, the father of many nations, the patriarch, willing to sacrifice or murder his son, coming out of Ur, it's Abram, later called Abraham.
Yeah.
It's time to dig in, but what are we drinking tonight, David?
Hey, this is Bibles and beer, and I always try to find something theologically themed. Tonight, from North Coast Brewing, we have Old Rasputin. Yes, Rasputin was a spiritual advisor for the Russian royal family. It's a good thing it's a dark beer because he was a sort of dark character. Probably his influence led to the Russian Revolution and getting the Romanovs offed by the people. And he himself, his assassin, had to kill him several times. So what's more theological than that? He kept coming back alive. And so here's Rasputin.
Back
Rasputin
from the dead.
beer.
Now, if you're watching on YouTube, it sounds like we've had a couple people with problems. I would highly recommend refreshing. I've been watching the stream. The stream seems to be very stable, quote unquote, right now, but that doesn't always mean everything. So I'm going to do some double checking for everyone, but we'll dig on in. David, are you ready?
I'm ready. All right.
Let's do this.
Okay, well, I've titled today, Abraham Breaks Some Things. I'm just going to do a little bit of the scripture and then kind of hop ahead to explain a little more of the story that you may have learned in Sunday school. Abraham, and here's a slide right off the net, father of faith. Yes, all three monotheisms in the Western tradition claim him in some way. He's claimed by the Jews as a patriarch. And as we go forward in Bible and Beer, we'll go down that family line that's mentioned in Genesis. The Christians see him as blessing to all people, which is one of the things that Yahweh promises him that he will be. And Muslims see him as one of the prophets. He's probably best known, as Justice mentioned, for that little near child sacrifice. But there's a lot more to the story than that. We'll come back to that. Always, I guess, one of the things that we've learned in Bibles and Beer is to ask this question: did this character actually exist? The question, as is often the case in Bibles and Beer, is maybe, could be. Or maybe his life was an invention, probably not just a total whole cloth invention, but a collection of myths, oral mythology that is then made into a story that makes more sense. If we look at the text closely, we will see that there are at least two different stories that are kind of bumped together there. Why would they have done that? Well, and it's very late, actually. And again, if you've been following along with Bibles and Beer, you see that a lot of the texts suddenly magically appear during that Babylonian captivity period. The Hebrew people had not seen any real need to write down these oral traditions until they found themselves in exile. And one of the reasons that scholars think that Abraham becomes part of the story is that he was part of an argument about a land deal. So when the Babylonian exiles begin to go back, They are going to be talking about, wait, we want this back. They've been gone a long time, and not all of the Hebrews had been exiled. And so the people had moved into these places, taken them over, started farming, and there were some land problems when the Babylonian captives began to come back. So some would say, hey, Moses promised my family this land. Here it is right here in this text. Well, who's going to argue with that? Well, the way to argue with that is to have Abraham promise your family the land, because Abraham comes before. So Abraham suddenly becomes very important in talking about real estate. Now, his journey is quite a long one. He is born in Ur of the Chaldees, as it's called at the time. We do know, of course, about Babylonia. Again, Bibles and beer, you've heard all of this before. Here's Babylon. So we're down in modern day Iraq, a little south of Baghdad, and we're going to have to go through the desert here, tracing along the worst part of the desert to get up to Haran, which is in southern Turkey. Nowadays, the site, it's no longer a settled place for people. And then it will eventually they'll go down to Egypt in another part of the story, and they end up buried in Hebron. So that's kind of the journey of Abraham and his wife Sarah. Now, if you're following the story, you've already heard about Noah on Bibles and Beer. So, according to these the Genesis genealogies, Abraham was the great keep counting, great grandson of Noah. But he was a grandson of Noah, so he is in this line of people that are going to matter a whole lot to the Hebrew God. So there you have it. Well, one of the interesting things, and that's why I titled tonight, Abraham Breaks Some Things, he is seen as establishing monotheism for the Western world in all three monotheisms. In the Quran, a story is told that Abraham's father, Terah, sold idols back in Ur. All right, he's got an idol shop. Fine way to make a living because Ur is a center of occultic ritual for the area. But young Abraham smashes the idols in his father's shop, an early sign of his fealty to one and an invisible God. Also, the story appears in Hebrew, does not appear in Hebrew scripture, but has been part of Hebrew oral tradition since all the way back. Abraham was at a bar mitzvah age. He was coming into adulthood and saw the terrible ways of his dad and of the idols and busted them up. One of the books that talks about this is The Gods Are Broken, The Hidden Legacy of Abraham by Rabbi Jeffrey Salkin. In that book, fascinating kind of argument that he makes that part of the Hebrew tradition that goes into Judaism is always going to be about breaking any kind of concept of God. Anything you can think of, from the stone little guys there to brass ones to some word or symbol that you're going to use, some metaphor. The Jewish tradition breaks them all, and that's coming directly out of Abraham. That's the idea anyway. So yes, he did break some things. A little iconography from the Middle Ages. He's got his sledgehammer there. He's going to do some busting up of the statue of Dad's statuary there. What a guy. So going to the actual words themselves, this begins in the late part of Genesis. Now these are the descendants of Terah, and now Terah is the father of Abraham, and you're going to see this Abraham thing going on. Abram means exalted father, not a bad thing to be called, but Abraham means the father of many nations. Hey, that's a lot more exalted. His wife, Sarai, and that meant princess, becomes Sarah later on, which also means princess. Darn, women never get a break in Hebrew scripture. There's some scholarly argument that actually the Sarai princess is sort of like, oh, what a princess, whereas the Sarah means, princess, right? So, going up the level from irony to an actual princess. Maybe not. All right. But there is one thing we knew about her, and this is a setup for the story, is that she is barren. She has no child. And along through the story, they're going to be getting on an age. We've heard that story over and over in Hebrew tradition. It's just part of the storylines. Terah took his son Abram and his grandson Lot. Now, remember Lot? He's the guy who's going to be running out of Sodom and Gomorrah, and his wife is going to be turned into a pillar of salt. Spoiler alert, right? But right now they're living in Ur, but Lot's going to come along and with his uncle Abram and to get out of there. And then they are going to go on up to Haran, not to be confused with the guy Haran. And wow, what a place to go in southern Turkey, a little town called Parched. So yeah, probably not the kind of place you want to hang out in too long. And indeed, Dad dies there. This is going into chapter 12. So then, now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I'll make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your great name great so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you, is what the King James Version that I learned says. And all the families of the earth shall be blessed. And so, yeah, hey, not a bad deal. And so Abraham takes that deal. And then the Lord says, I'm going to give this off to your offspring, all of this land. Now, again, if the scholars are correct that this is about land deals, then Abraham has the upper hand. He owned it all first, in other words. The trail that he takes from Ur into Canaan, Palestine, is traced historically because of the descriptions, more or less accurate, probably. They're at least there in one way and another. There is an Abraham's well along the path that you can visit even today. It has a nice visitor center, and there is the well. So along goes the story for a while, and he wanders around and just keeps getting richer and richer. And but they don't have any kids, and God has promised them a kid. Now, how are you going to be the father of many nations if you don't have any kids? So you got to be a father one way or another. Sarah laughs when these three visitors that are going to go, totally destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, they entertain them as guests, and they say, hey, guess what? Sarah's going to get pregnant. And so in the tent, she laughs. Well, that wasn't very nice, and she gets what she deserves. Along comes Isaac. And again, this is part of Hebrew scripture that the barren, older women who it would only be a miracle for them to have a child. And wow, here comes one. There is Isaac. All right. But ding, ding, ding. There's a subplot in another part of the story. Let's skip back right now, though, and see if we can take any questions that may have occurred to anyone or anything you've heard about the Abraham story that might be of interest to you. So now I know, Justice, that your Sunday school teacher didn't say that Abraham might be fictional. I'm quite sure of that, right?
No, not fictional. We would go back and forth on debating the historical accuracy on it, though. So a lot of times there were the conversation about the stories, but there would also be tied into this is what we know, and then please go out and research this. Please go do architect. The believing that if you believe that it's in the ground, you're going to find it in the ground. Right. The same problem with Moses and the chariots, right? And Noah's Ark, because they want to prove that this is the case.
Right. Right.
But definitely, anyone, if you have any questions whatsoever, David is glad to answer and take a second look at it. Throw it up in the chat. I'll make sure to get the question straight to him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's like with Smith's, the 12 tribes of Israel becoming the 10 tribes becoming the Native Americans in the U.S. Nowadays we have DNA testing, so we can say, well, no, they didn't.
Yeah.
But I mean, for many years, these things were unquestionable, right? Because how could you question them? But as it goes along, we learn. I think we got a question.
Yeah, so we have a question from K. Williams Jones. Why was Abraham selected by God? Just was he in line for it?
Well, Kim, that's a really good point. Now, if you're a Bible believing person, you're going to say that Yahweh, God, the monotheistic big G God, needed to get through to somebody, and he was a faithful person and actually listened to God and then obeyed God and began the whole story of monotheism. That's one way of seeing it. Another would be, he's making this stuff up. I mean, he does seem to be a bit of a psychopath, actually. When you get into the story, I mean, you just don't try to kill your kid one day, and that's just not really good behavior. And so, yeah, it's there have been various arguments about schizophrenia. Why was he hearing voices? What kind of voices was he hearing? Why was he in and hearing about somebody telling him to go to Palestine on the other side of the desert? Good question. So I think we'll have to agree to disagree. Maybe the great God was speaking to him, and maybe he was just a bit of a he was a wanderer. There you go.
Joyce Riedessel reaches out and says, didn't Abraham have a son by a concubine?
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert, that's for sure.
That's the next part of the story. Yes, yes, he did. So, and as a matter of fact, if you want to look into it, it's very odd. He does have the son we'll be talking about, but he had 6 other ones by his wife after Sarah dies. And he totally disinherits them because, the oldest son thing. These patriarchs. Yeah.
Well, with that question, I think that's a good segue directly into the next set.
All right, let's go see. So then along comes Isaac, but ding, 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 da, da, da. The next part of the story is that because Sarah didn't think she would ever have a child, and because Abraham was so into being the father of nations, she says, I'm going to make this guy happy. I want him to have a kid. I can't do that. So I'm going to tell my Egyptian slave, Hagar, to go have sex with him and have a child with him, which she does because she's a slave and she does what she is told to do. And indeed, Ishmael is born. Oh, yay, Dad really likes him until along comes the child of Sarah and Isaac. And then, because again, who's going to inherit the big kingdom here? So Sarah talks Abraham into kicking them out. Says, give him some water. Tell him to walk across the desert back to Egypt. No problem, right? No problem. And so off they go. They don't really have a choice about that. Part of the story, as I mentioned, is this very odd bit, and in which Abraham tries to kill Isaac, because why would you send off your one child, Ishmael, off into the desert to die? That was the idea, Sarah's idea anyway. And then why would you kill your own kid? Because and this is one of those greatly discussed problems in the story is what was something wrong with him? Why would he do that? Or was it really great faith? Just like it was great faith when he, busts up his dad's idol shop back in just as it's great faith when he takes off across the desert. He has great faith. Well, maybe that's one answer. And artists love this. They love the story of Abraham about to kill Isaac. This is, right, split-second timing here, a perfect Hollywood set. And so you've always got the poised knife, and here he is dropping it, right before he slits the throat of dear old Isaac. But he's willing to kill his only son because God tells him to do that. Christians have gone to town on this story because that would be a metaphor of God killing his only son, Jesus. There you go. That would be one way to read the story. Nothing intentional about that in Hebrew tradition, of course. You're going to see a lot of art if you like biblical art. Here is poor Hagar and Ishmael out in the desert. They have dropped their water jug here because it's empty. And they're going to die with the elements. Oh, no, they won't. Bing, along comes a blonde-headed angel. Again, a little bit of an artist's underappreciation of the way Palestinian people actually would have looked, and Egyptians, but whatever. So here is Ishmael dying over here. In the text, it does say that she couldn't stand to watch him die, so she leaves him under a tree and some shade and goes somewhere else, actually. So that part of it is a little better in this presentation. But in the scriptures, it says, "What's the matter, Hagar?" says the angel. "Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation." Yahweh will. Wow, that's just what he got, bumped out of back in the other place here. So suddenly he's going to become a great nation. But wait a minute, two great nations may have some problems. Then God opened her eyes and she saw a well of water. So she went and filled the skin. This is all, not true to have. You don't go carrying pottery around with water in it when you're making desert trips. They actually used the skins of animals for water bottles, right? So she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. God was with the boy as he grew up. He lived in the desert and became a great archer. Yay. So that's Ishmael. Well, in Islamic tradition, Muslims believe that Abraham and his son Ishmael constructed the kebab. That is the center of the great pilgrimage that you see, that big black block. That is built around a smaller structure that is believed to have been built by Abraham and Ishmael. Why would you care about that? Because Ishmael becomes the father of a great nation, which is the Arabians, and who become Muslim eventually. So that's that story and how that works. And then how are you going to talk about that story through time? Well, you're going to say, guess what, Israel, and guess what, Palestinians who are descendant of Ishmael, no wonder you have a problem, because it goes all the way back to that little family squabble that they had all those years ago between Sarah and Hagar. And many people consider this to be a historical reality. But that's certainly why you see the Kaaba as being so sacred, because Abraham and Ishmael go, they build this, and they are destroying idols all the way as they go in the story. To kind of finish the story, there is a very important bit here, again, that's about real estate. Sarah dies, and so Abraham is broken up about that. He doesn't actually own the land yet, but in Hebron, he buys a series of caves. These come to be called the Caves of the Patriarch, and they are in Hebron on the West Bank even today. This is a contemporary picture. Where are the caves? Well, they're inside the building. The mouths of the caves are inside the building. The first part of the building was built by Christian missionaries to the area. That was destroyed. And then Crusaders rebuilt it a little bit later, and that was then taken over by Saladin of historical historically true person, and you do see minarets. Then in 1967, I mean, the story just goes on, right? When you have stuff this old, the plot keeps going. In 1967, when the Israelis take over the West Bank, this is seized, and as a peace offering, it is left to be. Half of it is now, the way from my reading anyway, half of it is going to be a mosque, and half of it is just a Hebrew grave. So there you go. But a long story going on there. And indeed, this is the mouth of a cave where Abraham is buried. You do notice that this is Hebrew on the outer gates here, because this is after 1967. And if you look down inside, you will see a different language because this is an older part of the building. So, again, very, very contested ground. Many Muslims will argue that this is the second holiest site of all. How do you measure holy? But if the Abraham story is very much part of the traditions of both Judaism and Islam, and so this is very important to them. And by the way, Sarah does get her own little grave in a cave there. If you want to go visit that, I understand, and you can find pictures of that around. And that's the story. That's what we got going on with Abraham, and of course we know the rest of the story. Since you can, after COVID, go find the West Bank even today, and with it's still very much part of an argument that's going on. And again, it's seen in traditional terms as a house squabble between two moms. So there you have it. Well, let's get back to some questions here as I enjoy some old Rasputin. I hope everyone is having a beer or something of your choice. Let's get a question up, huh?
Well, I would venture the question, what is the significance of the conversation about Why is it so important that we talk about too? I mean, we hinted at it, but what's the big significance of coming from there?
Okay, well, do you want to take a shot at it from your tradition, or shall I go first?
Well, I figured I'd ask you because I don't know everything.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know everything either. But you can see why this is an important site to denigrate. Because and Bible and beer veterans know that the mythologies and the stories are being taken wholesale from Mesopotamian areas. So these are Mesopotamian myths. And it's going to be very important to say that they are the product of idols, of their lies. When the Christians come along, they're going to say that idols are of the devil. So we have to attack that entire idea for one reason, because we're going to steal their stuff. Right? We're going to take their intellectual property, and there's no copyright laws, so they're not going to get sued. But we're going to say that they were wrong. And because they were worshiping these gods of stone instead of this incorporeal God that's somewhere out there, right? So I think that's the answer. So
do we have any traditions or any knowledge of what, when we talk about the other sons that Abraham had much after Sarah died, do we have any traditions or anything that you know of going back around them?
I don't, and I don't remember their names either, or even their mom's name. See, she doesn't make it, and they don't make it into Hebrew scripture that I can remember. So, but these are oral traditions that float around, and people do preserve them. So those ideas are out there. There are lots of stories in Islam and in Jewish tradition that are not written down. But these are oral cultures still today, right? I mean, you can go to Hebrew school today, and you're going to learn stuff from your rabbi that is not written in the book, right? So, that's been passed down. So, yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions that you'd like David to answer around the life and times of Abraham?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now, oh, by the way, I found it interesting to Google. When you start Googling Abraham, what pops up is Abraham Lincoln, right? And I mean, there is within, especially African American tradition, a very strong idea of a mythology idea that Abraham Lincoln, is their father, right? Is a father figure, like Abraham is a father. He's the father of freedom, and the fact that and is often called Father Abraham, right? Which, of course, that's the traditional Hebrew way of describing it as Father Abraham. Father Abraham is also a patriarch or a freer of people in the United States, which I think is also interesting.
So Joyce brings up the statement, and we kind of go back to Isaac, and when Abraham tried to kill him, was sent to kill him. What was God's purpose in trying to prove faith through killing? Right? Joyce says God seems to be into killing of children to prove faith. Poor old Job lost a passel of kids.
Yeah, he did.
I know from my tradition, every bit of it was a precursor to Jesus Christ.
Right.
Every bit of it was symbology, symbolism, and connection, and everything can be read into that.
Right.
When I was preparing for going overseas as a missionary over to Indonesia, I worked on a set of curriculum, and I have it somewhere around in one of my old boxes somewhere. Which that's the whole concept, is that you go into a tribe and your focus is someone who's never even heard of Jesus. And you then walk through the very beginning of the Bible all the way through and use it as precursors every step of the way. It's about the precursor. And Abraham leads to a very strong period of time in your storytelling to focus on the precursor as of who Jesus Christ is meant to be. This is out of his line that he is going to be coming.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's brilliant. I mean, one of the things that I think Christians or people out of Christian tradition, we are products of the Reformation. So we think of theology first, and we think of history first, and we think of archaeology and all of these things. But, I mean, most human cultures haven't and don't think that way. Things are story, and story is meaningful. We dismiss this stuff out of hand when we shouldn't. It's story that does matter. It's just that the Reformation set Protestantism on a course to question just about everything. And as I've often said, Unitarians are the ultimate, protesting Protestants. That's our problem in some ways, is we protest everything, and we're so skeptical. But yeah, no, for in most human cultures, you can see why, because if you get into an oral culture and say, who's the patriarch, who's the, you're going to get these stories of family lines, right? That you can compare with.
And it's that mixture, it's that mythos of taking narrative and story and interweaving it with truth. And so you take these concepts that you want your kids to understand, or you want someone else that you're trying to teach to then bury in the concepts and the things, and then you tie it and you make it and you say that it is true, it is real, because then you get this backing of historical significance to it that then takes it to that whole next level of where narrative combines and controls.
Right. Well, and then more to the question though too. There is an argument within the Jewish oral tradition that this is a way of saying within Hebrew tradition, because I mean, remember, the Jesus story is not part of Jewish tradition, right? That's a Christian add-on. So this is a story that says don't do child sacrifice, even if you would be willing to kill your firstborn. Which people around them were doing, right? Don't do that, so that's a positive spin. But the Christians come along and mess that bit of it up, because we say that God did the right thing by sacrificing his only son. John 3:16. That's the right thing to do. So we have to tell the Abraham story in a different way as well. Right.
Yeah, and being able to use narrative as a system is really powerful, because that's the reason we like you and I work with J. Exodus Hooper, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that you're very heady, you're very knowledge driven, you focus very much on that whole concept. But Jay brings out the heart, and being able to be willing to play with some of the narrative and question what is real and question where the connection is brings a lot of bearing. And when I was a Christian, when I was a fundamentalist, those thoughts were the things that gave me so much strength to who I was, those narratives behind the surface. So when we talked about Abraham willing to sacrifice his son, that gave me the willingness to go out and be willing to sacrifice my own life for furthering the message.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. That you must be willing to give up everything, because Abraham was willing to do that, and Abraham is the founder of our faith. Say all three monotheisms. So so his ultimate faith in busting up his dad's shop, leaving town, going to a place he had never seen before. I mean, because you don't get to watch a documentary about Canaan in those days, right? So I mean, this is living by faith. Living by faith. That's part of the story. Absolutely.
Well, we're hitting right up onto the top. It's almost 7:40, so I think it's about time that we start to wrap things up.
All right.
Before we take off,
before
we take off, got to remind everyone we still have our after party. You can't have Bibles and beer without a little bit of an after party.
Yay.
So I'm going to go ahead really quickly and throw the link to our gathering into chat.
I'm going to cut and paste it.
I'll send it to you as well, by the way.
Wow, I've already snagged it on Restream there. Great.
Now, if you guys want to join us, we're going to go ahead and throw that Zoom meeting up here in the next 5 minutes. I may not be there right away, but I will get it up and running so that we can all join on in. For the rest of you, if you're, I thank you so much for all of you who attended and joined on in. Please take a moment to like, share, subscribe this. We want to get these messages out of how we dig into the Bible, we understand it, and then look at it from a humanist and an understanding of what do we actually understand and what happened in the culture, the historical significance, and the barriers, because the Bible is a powerful document for all of us. If you want, tomorrow morning, David will be leading Coffee and Wisdom. David, give us a little bit of a snippet of what you're going over tomorrow.
Well, we have been talking about nostalgia all week, things we don't remember, not personal nostalgia, how, we're used to live. This is cultural nostalgia about the good old days that probably didn't actually occur, or if they did, they may have only occurred for your own socioeconomic group. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk a little bit about history that also often doesn't happen, because history is just a fancy way of doing nostalgia, isn't it? So that's what we're going to be looking at tomorrow. Yep.
Well, and then we have Sunday Assembly on Sunday, which will be on the First Unitarian YouTube page, as well as you can find it at firstunitarian.org/live. And then Tuesday, we're going to have a special treat on Dinner Conversation.
Yay.
On Tuesday, Mandisa Thomas and J. Exodus Hooper will be having a conversation. They're going to be going over, Jay's doing a whole series all month long, every Tuesday night. Black Love is Black Wealth. Yeah. And Mandisa Thomas will be here next Tuesday, so we look forward to that event. And then finally, Bibles and Beer next Wednesday. What do we have going? What do we have on plate?
Next week, I want to talk about Paul sending all the people, even some of his fellow church people, to hell. Now, how cool is that for a preacher to be able to do? Well, it is a fantasy, but I want to look at Paul's idea of apocalypse.
Yeah,
that'll show him.
Well, thanks, everyone, and we will see you later. Bye.
Thanks.